Alright, so we're gonna get started here. Let's throw some characters together. Let's get Luffy. Well, let's do the monster trio. We'll get Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. Who to fight? Who to fight? Who to fight? Screw it. Let's throw Boa, Sabo, and Teach. We'll just have this all one piece. Alright, so Luffy, at a very young age, I believe he was about 7, ate the Gumu Gumu no Mi. That's the Japanese name. The English name is the Gum Gum fruit. And just right off the bat, let me establish the types of devil fruits. The origin of the devil fruits is not known, at least not now in the story. We don't know where they come from. But we do know that devil fruits are some kind of supernatural force that possess fruits. And when you eat the fruit, you get the power. And then when you die, the power leaves you, and whatever supernatural force is behind all this finds the nearest fruit and transforms that into the next incarnation of the said devil fruit. So let's say you ate a devil fruit, like, I don't know, let me make one up. The metal fruit, okay? Lets you turn your body into metal and control metal, okay? Let's say when you ate the metal fruit, it resembled a freaking star fruit. By the way, if anybody's ever tried a star fruit, let me know. I've seen them in my local grocery store. I'm kind of interested to try them, but I don't know what they taste like, and I've never, I don't even know how to dismantle one. So, if anybody's ever had a star fruit, let me know what they taste like. Are they sweet? Are they bitter? Like, let me know, because I'm kind of curious to try some. But let's say, like, when you ate it, it was a star fruit, right? And then, like, okay, you meet your untimely demise, and the power of the metal fruit leaves you, and let's say that the nearest available fruit is let's say an orange, okay? The power of the metal fruit would then possess that orange and would transform it into the next incarnation of the metal fruit. That's how that works, and I'll bring this up again when I talk about Sabo, because Sabo's not the first person to possess his powers, and it's actually a big deal in the story that Sabo has this power. But okay, that's how devil fruits work. Like I said, don't know the origins, but that's how their powers work. Supposedly, you're not supposed to be able to eat more than one fruit. They say if you eat more than one, if you try to eat, like, you eat one fruit, like if you ate the metal fruit and then you tried to eat the, I don't know, the rock fruit that would let you, like, turn into rock and control rocks. Supposedly, your body's, like, can't handle having that power inside you, and you freaking are supposed to explode, is what they say happens. But we have seen Blackbeard. He's actually done it, and there's many theories about how he did it and survived. I'll go over those when I get to him, though, and I'll explain my idea on him. Well, we don't know how he's done it yet, but I'll explain how he's done it. But there are another thing to know about devil fruits is they are all weak to the ocean, or being submerged in water in general, but considering that it is a pirate-themed story, of course, it's primarily the ocean. Now, when you're submerged in ocean water, or any water in general, your powers still work. It's just that your body's energy is automatically, like, drained to where you're, like, exhausted, and you just cannot continue on. You're just so tired. It just drains your body of all energy. Well, that's why they say that when you eat a devil fruit, you lose the ability to swim. It's not that you forget how to swim. You know, you could be the greatest swimmer in the world, then you eat your, the metal or the rock, or in Luffy's case, the gum fruit, and you can be the greatest swimmer in the world, but like when you get submerged, it's not that you just like how to swim left your mind. You can never learn how to swim. It's just that your body is physically unable to swim. But your powers still work, but you just can't really use them because you're too tired. Like Luffy's power. Let's just get right to it. Luffy's power with the gum fruit is it gave his body the properties of rubber. All right, his body can stretch and flex and inflate and be filled with air and water and all kinds of crazy stuff that Luffy's done with his abilities. All because of his body taking on the properties of rubber. And I mean, he's rubber all the way down to the molecular level. All right, that plays into his powers that I'll explain later on. But that's his primary ability. And just because Luffy is too tired to use his abilities does not mean that his abilities are automatically turned off. Like Luffy's crew has managed to save his life by grabbing a hold of his head, and his body is submerged underwater, but they grab a hold of his head and hold his head above water, so his body is sinking, but his neck, due to the nature of his powers, is stretching, and they're holding his head above water, so as his body sinks, his head is held up there and his neck is stretching out, okay? So that's the nature of his gum fruit. That's how his power works. It's a rather simple ability, but the things Luffy does with it, Luffy is extremely creative with the gum fruit. That's how it works. Now, real quick, let me explain the types of devil fruits. There are multiple different types. They're categorized in 3 different. There is the fruits, which are all categorized by they give you the ability to turn into an animal. You have the ability to, if you ate the lion fruit, okay, you would be able to turn into a lion. Now, here's the thing. There are multiple different fruits for multiple different animals, but if they're all of, the same family, they're all classified under the same name, but then it's, a model is given. So far in the story, I think we've seen, 2 dog-based devil fruits, and they're both called the dog fruit, but one was called the model dachshund, which, I'm going to have to talk about that one, because that's kind of interesting, because that was the first time we saw something really interesting in the story done with devil fruits besides, people actually eating them and using them. I'll get into that later, but, but that's what it does, lets you turn into an animal, but, dog fruit, we had the model dachshund, and then we had the dog fruit model wolf. And now, I think one of the members of Blackbeard's crew, which is the only female on the crew, she has what's called a mythical zone. It's still a dog fruit, I believe, but it lets her turn into a mythological animal rather than an actual, confirmed existing animal, which is a kitsune, or actually I believe it's a 9-tailed fox, which is a legendary mythological creature from Japanese mythology. I'll definitely do a video about her, because she's really interesting. She's the only female on Blackbeard's crew that we know of. So she's interesting. I'll talk about her later. But that's a subcategory of zones, is mythological. It lets you, turn into, it still lets you turn into an animal, but you're turning into a mythological animal. So, a phoenix or a dragon or something like that. That's how that works. Zones, their powers are you can revert back to your normal human self. You can turn into your full animal form. So like with the dog fruit, you could go full wolf, but you'd be like a huge wolf. Or you can turn into a hybrid. So like with the wolf fruit, it would like let you turn into a very large half man, half wolf, kind of like a wolf man or a werewolf looking kind of creature. And of course, they give you insane strength, agility. If you happen to turn into an animal that has the power to fly, you can fly. Um, so that's how zones work. And before you ask, yes, there is a human fruit. There's actually two of them that have been shown in the story so far, and I'll talk about both of them later on. But that's zones. Then there are Logia devil fruits. Sabo, he has a Logia devil fruit. I'll talk about them. Sabo and Teach both have Logia devil fruits. I'll talk about them later. But Logias let you turn into and control an element. So like with Sabo, in Sabo's case, it's fire. In other cases, it could be electricity. Like the examples I gave earlier, like the metal fruit and the rock fruit, those would be considered Logias because you're turning into like a natural existing force, an elemental force, or like a substance that exists in the world. No idea if a water fruit exists because you gotta remember, being submerged in water is a major weakness of devil fruit. So if you could turn into water, it'd be really weird. There are devil fruits that kind of go around this because like one of the marine admirals that is in the One Piece world, he can turn into and control ice. So that's the closest we've got, really. But that's how all Logia fruits work. You can turn into and control an element. And I'll get into more about them when I talk about Sabo and Teach. Then finally, we have what Luffy and Boa are. Their devil fruits are called Paramecia. And Paramecia are basically whatever weird devil fruit abilities the author of One Piece can come up with that don't qualify as zones or Logias. They're all automatically Paramecias. And Paramecias can have effects that could, that can be very similar to zones and Logias. And there are some weird powers. Okay, there are some weird powers. But that's the explanation for how that works. Okay, so we have Logia, Paramecia, and Zone. So getting back on topic with Luffy, now that we've taken up most of his screen time to tell the tale of how all devil fruits work, Luffy's power is the Gum Gum fruit, the Gumu Gumu no Mi, and he ate this when he was about 7 years old. I think currently in the story he's about 19, probably closer to 20 years old. So he's had this for over a decade, that he's had this power. And like I said, it's given his body the properties of rubber. So his body can stretch and move and everything like that of rubber. We don't know how far he can stretch. It's been stated by the author that he can stretch, like, I think it was like 50 Gumu Gumus, which is just like basically the author saying, like, here's a made-up measurement of how far he can stretch. It's never said in like actual like miles or feet or meters or kilometers of how far he can stretch, but he can stretch pretty dang far. And the way Luffy primarily uses this to fight is Luffy is deceptively strong. You look at him and he looks kind of scrawny, but he is fairly strong. He definitely has some degree of superhuman strength, and this is not just from his devil fruit. This is just Luffy himself is actually really strong. We've seen him, carrying huge amounts of weight very easily, and he's not using his devil fruit power to do it. So he's actually really strong, and very fast too, but he uses the power of his devil fruit to augment that. With his stretching abilities, Luffy adds momentum to his punches, so he can like stretch his arm back and like throw his arm back and then have it stretch forward, like basically kind of like think of like how a slingshot works, where okay, Luffy's arm becomes like the sling and then his fist is the pellet or something that you're firing. That's kind of how his ability works, and that's how he uses it. His stretching ability just adds momentum to what would already be a strong punch or a strong kick. He just uses that to do that. All of Luffy's attacks they all include Gamu Gamu no in the name. As you've seen, I've used Gum Gum Red Hawk several times now. There's Gum Gum Grizzly Magnum. Most of his attacks are all named after animals. Like his basic attacks, like his basic very close range punch is called the Gum Gum Bullet, or Gamu Gamu no Bullet. Then there's like his more oomph punch, which is the Gum Gum Pistol. There's his really cranked up punch of the Gum Gum Rifle, Gum Gum. There's one where he basically does like a flying, like he does like a Gum Gum powered tackle well, he does it in like a couple of different ways, like where he stretches both arms back and like then flings them at an opponent. That's the Gum Gum Bazooka. And I think there was another time, like maybe it was just a mistranslation that I saw, but like he did like basically a Gum Gum powered tackle that I think was also called Gum Gum Bazooka, although that might have been like corrected to have some other name. I forget what that one's called. I'd have to look that up later. Like all his basic attacks are named after weapons. Like even if like Luffy jumps up in the air and then does like stretches out both legs to hit his opponent from way up there, that's called the Gum Gum Spear. So that's how his powers work. Then Luffy is a ditz, but he's not a total idiot. Like he understands when he's going to be facing against enemies that are stronger than him. So Luffy takes advantage of his rubber nature to battle them. Like he gets creative with his abilities. Like when he fought another character I'm gonna have to talk about, which is a man named Crocodile. Crocodile had a Logia fruit that was the Suna Suna no Mi, or the Sand fruit, and it let him transform into, in turn, use the power of sand. Well, Luffy figured out that he couldn't really hurt him because he could just turn into sand, but one thing that Luffy figured out is if Crocodile got wet, got covered in water or something, his body would solidify, much like, you know, sand becomes very solid when it's wet. Anybody that's been to the beach, you can see how like mushy and more solid, more packed together sand is when it's wet. That's something that Luffy did. So Luffy found like this huge water tower and friggin' like drank a whole crap ton of water, and then he would like basically spit it out on like either on himself or on Crocodile to like keep his sand body more condensed so that he could actually hit him. Now later on, Luffy develops a special technique called Haki that I'll have to explain that in a side note. Basically, Haki is a mind over matter kind of technique. There's 3 versions of it. Luffy has all 3 versions. There's Conqueror's Haki, which is basically like a psychic bomb, where basically the power of your mind overwhelms the minds of anyone else around you unless they too are very strong-willed or they also have Conqueror's Haki. Then there is Observation Haki, which ups the strength of your senses, particularly your power of sight. Luffy's observation haki is honed to the point where he can actually see a short distance into the future. So you can kind of like sense incoming attacks that way. And then Luffy, his final one is the armament haki, which is how he's, like, you notice when he does that technique, his arm turns black. That's what armament haki does. It basically lets you like increase the density or like the defensive capabilities of your skin. So your arm like becomes black. Like whatever you use it on becomes black, and it's like kind of like iron, kind of like metal, I guess. That's probably due to the fact that armament haki exists. Like there might be a metal fruit, but due to how armament haki works and how it looks, I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't a metal fruit, just simply because of how haki looks. But Luffy has that, and he uses the power of haki to augment some of his attacks. Now, one thing that Luffy does is Luffy has these powerful techniques that he's come up with, you know, like things like Mizu Luffy, where he drank all that water to fight Crocodile. That's just a spur of the moment idea that Luffy had. He's done crap like that before to fight other enemies. But like in terms of just Luffy using his own abilities to power himself up, Luffy has 3 what's called gears. So like his normal form, I guess, would be gear 1. Then he uses the fact that he is rubber all the way down to the molecular level to force his heart and circulatory system to pump blood extra hard through his body, therefore increasing his strength and speed by a drastic amount. But it has the side effect of it basically superheats his body to the point where his skin takes on like a pinkish red tone, and his body heat is so hot that his sweat is actually turning to steam as it comes out. And this power-up is called Gear Second. And it's actually where Gum Gum Red Hawk comes in. Like after Luffy really learned how to use haki, he combined that with Gear Second, and like basically he coats his arm in armament haki, and then used Gear Second, and his body heat is just like so extreme at that point that it creates an effect where his arm basically looks like it burst into flames. So that's how that works. And it's said that this is really taxing on his body, which, you know, you would think that, you know, considering he's you know, making his heart and body pump more blood than create and pump more blood than it's normally used to. Yeah, of course that would be very hard on your body. That's why after the 2-year time skip that takes place in the story, which I'll explain more about that when I get to talking about Sabo, Luffy has learned how to very quickly slide in and out of Gear Second, like where he just kind of goes into it temporarily and then turns it right back off. Like goes into it, does a handful of attacks, and then turns it off. That's how he kind of does it now. All of his attacks are basically the same. The only thing that he's changed is he adds the word jet now, because like it does increase his strength, but it increases his speed so much more. And so that's why he has jet. Like, okay, you have Gum Gum Jet Bullet, Gum Gum Jet Pistol, so on and so forth. Then the next gear is Gear Third, which is where like it gets even stranger. Like, okay, I believe that, like, you know, you could work yourself up. You could make your heart pump harder, usually through some kind of physical exertion. Who knows? There might be a meditation technique that you could use to do that. But with the Gear Third and Gear Fourth, only Luffy could really do this. Gear Third's, I'm just going to state what the main ability of Gear Third is. Gear Third's main ability is called Bone Balloon. Yes, bone balloon. Basically what Luffy does is he uses his stretchy nature to inhale a whole bunch of air that he holds in, and then he basically usually he bites into like his thumb. Sometimes he bites into other parts of his body, but it's usually his thumb. And he bites like, because here's the thing, like Luffy is completely immune to bullets. He can't be shot. Like, he can still feel the impact, I'm sure, and like, okay, if you punch him in the face, yeah, he'll definitely feel it. He feels, like, blunt impacts, but they do less damage to him than sharp objects. So you could kill Luffy with a sword, but you probably can't kill him with a gun, okay? Like, that's like, because, you know, it just bounces off rubber, but like a sword would pierce through it. That's basically something that goes on with Luffy. So Luffy has to be careful when he's fighting someone who basically has either powers that have like sharp claws or have blades or anything like that. Luffy, that says something about how sharp Luffy's teeth must be, because Luffy's able to bite down into his own thumb all the way down to the bone and penetrate his own bones, and then he exhales all that air that he sucked up into his bones, and it causes his bones to inflate like balloons, and then he kind of moves that air, that massive air, through his body to like different points wherever he kind of needs it. It's usually in his arms, this increases like the surface area of his body, allowing him to basically use like turn his fists gigantic and just have like pure crushing force is what they're for. And then that's basically what that's for. Let me see here. Let me switch over to Luffy and I'll show you a technique here of Luffy's. There you go, Grum Gum Grizzly Magnum. That is a Gear 3rd technique. And after the time skip, after he learned how to use Haki, he added Haki to it, so now it's even more damaging. But that's Gear 4th right there. We'll get into that here in a minute. But originally there was a side effect of Gear 3rd as well, which was that whenever he kind of deactivated it, he would shrink down to like tiny little kid size, and then like it would take a little bit of time for him to grow back to normal size. So that's Gear 3rd. Gear 4th is the latest one. And Gear 4th takes full advantage of Luffy's mastery over Armament Haki, where he kind of coats the majority of his body in Armament Haki, like his legs, I think his back, part of his torso is all covered in it, his arms, I think it even goes up his neck and like around parts of his face, is all coated in Armament Haki. And it has some similar effects to Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd, because its activation method is very similar to Gear 3rd, but like I think he also has like this ring of smoke that flows around him, and I think that's basically kind of like the same idea of the steam that's coming off of him in Gear 2nd. I think that's like his sweat is being superheated and becoming kind of smoky. So I'm pretty sure his body temperature is probably raised from trying to maintain this form. But Gear 4th is its main ability, other than being almost completely coated head to foot in Haki, is and Haki, by the way, is spelled H-A-K-I. Okay, so that's how you spell Haki. But like other than being almost completely coated in Haki, the main ability of Gear 4th is Muscle Balloon. So Gear 3rd was Bone Balloon. Gear 4th is Muscle Balloon. And basically, it's the same kind of activation method as Gear 3rd, where Luffy inhales a whole bunch of air, and then he bites into, usually it's the side of his arm, and he exhales that air, but he doesn't bite all the way down to the bone this time. He bites only into his muscle, which is still saying something, because I don't know if you've ever tried to bite into your own skin, like maybe do it as a joke or something. Penetrating your own skin is something that, like, you have to will yourself to be able to do it. I can't do it, and I doubt anybody else can. But Luffy, you know, like, just like he's overcome that whole "don't bite yourself" freaking idea, so he can do these techniques. So he breathes all that air in there, and his body inflates. He's inflating his muscles now, and it's more spread out. Like, instead of just being concentrated in one area like it is with Gear 3rd, it's now spread out through the majority of his upper body. Like his chest and stomach area inflate, his arms inflate, and he's also completely coated in hockey. Also, it seems to be that he's incapable of actually, like, standing still when he uses Gear 4th, because he's constantly bouncing up and down when he's using that power. What's interesting is that when he's using this power, he can, like, rapidly constrict and release his legs. Like, he can pull his legs, like, almost all the way up into his hips, basically. Like, he can, like, basically from the ankle up, he can pull his feet, like, just, like, collapse his whole leg up into, like, basically his hips, and then, like, release that, and it's acting like a piston that actually pushes Luffy into the air. And by doing this rapidly, Luffy basically can be airborne using this technique. So when you see here the Gear 4th attack, that's how he's basically flying through the air. He's rapidly using the power of his, you know, constricting and releasing his legs to act as pistons to where he's effectively flying. And we've seen multiple incarnations of Gear 4th. I'm pretty sure the form that we saw was just a situational thing, kind of like the whole Mizu Luffy idea, where he was fighting a guy named Cracker, who had the ability to summon multiple soldiers. I'll get into Cracker because he's part of the Big Mom Pirates, and the Big Mom Pirates all have like a food theme. So Cracker's abilities, he can clap his hands like that, and he summons like these soldiers that are literally made out of biscuits. And Luffy is just like, oh heck, I love to eat anyway, I'm just gonna devour these soldiers. And he does this, and then he like gets really big and fat, and then he like activates Gear 4th, and he just takes advantage of the fact that he's big and fat, and he calls that form Tank Man. His original Gear 4th form is called Bound Man. And then the latest one that we've seen, where he was fighting another member of the Big Mom Pirates named Katakuri, who I'll get into Katakuri because he's actually really interesting, because there's a theory about Katakuri that if it's true, it would kind of apply to Luffy too, and I'll get into that when I talk about Katakuri. But Katakuri had like insanely powerful observation haki, so Luffy was struggling against him. Like both, it was a clash of observation haki basically. Katakuri's observation haki was so good that, you know, he was extremely fast. So Luffy knew he needed to get faster. So he had this new form of Gear 4th, which was called Snake Man. So it's like basically, they're all called Gear 4th, and they're just different versions of Gear 4th. But very easily, these could have been like Gear 4th, 5th, and 6th. You know, just the way that they're very different from each other and the way they act. Whereas, you know, Gear 4th, as you see in the game, he gets like, you know, basic Gear 4th and Bound Man, he gets like really big. And then like with Tank Man, he was just like blown up from all the food he ate already, so he's just taking advantage of the fact that his body's like already bulked out from eating so much. But then Snake Man was very interesting, where he once again kind of like loaded up the muscles of his arms mostly. With the Gear 4 power, his chest and legs and everything didn't really get that much bigger. But that one was all about speed, and that was where we see Luffy doing crazy stuff where he's using, like, he could do it in other Gear 4 forms, where he had this technique called Culvern, where like, okay, like if his original punch misses, it basically can, like, the way Luffy's stretching power works is like he can throw a punch, and if he misses, then he can have, like, basically using the power of his stretchy ability, his fist can like ricochet through the air and still try to find its mark, just like constantly bending and stretching around in the air. And Luffy calls that Culvern, or I believe he pronounces it Culvrine or something like that in the Japanese version. And with Snake Man, when he uses Gear 4 Snake Man, when he's using Culvrine, I think he like specifically refers to this particular technique as Python, and it keeps going faster, and like each time it ricochets in the air, it's getting faster. So like his punch is like just increasing in speed. The power, overall power, like the strength behind the punch, might remain the same as when he first launched it, but the speed is increasing exponentially as it rebounds through the air. So that was like one of the ways he tried to turn the tables against Katakuri. No idea if he's gonna have a Gear 5th or if there's gonna be more Gear 4th forms, but yeah, Gum Gum Fruit, for like just a simple ability of just makes your body rubber. Luffy's made it work, man. Luffy has really made it work, and I'm gonna try to keep the next video shorter and just focus only on the character at hand. So I'm gonna like look at like how long this freaking video is once I'm done talking. But yep, that's Luffy and the Gum Gum Fruit as we know it. I think next, let's talk about Boa Hancock, because I want to talk about a woman with some big old boobies. Yeah.